everyone. Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for novices, wardens, masters alike. I am Dan. My co-host is, of course, Josh.
Hello, everybody.
And on today's podcast, it's another email palooza.
We got a lot of email.
We finally did.
Great.
We've been telling you to email, and you finally did.
We got like 8 emails, like 9 emails. We got a lot of them, which is awesome.
So today's podcast is all things quizzical, correctional, and artisanal. I don't know. I'm just going to go with that.
We've got some lovely artisanal emails for you today, folks.
Artisanal emails. So by all means, if you want us to read your email on the air, at least part of it, please let us know and drop us a line at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, Josh got a last-minute email in, so he's going to read that one, and we'll answer that, and then we'll get to the rest of them. So if you don't like our answers to emails, skip the episode and go back and listen to everything else before this. So otherwise, Josh, let's...
Why wouldn't they like the answers to the emails? Because the questions prompt some interesting discussions.
Absolutely. And, you know, if one person asks the question to us, at least 10 others have asked it verbally, not to us in email, but they've at least asked it to themselves. So,
sure.
Yes, we'll get there.
All right.
Anyway,
so who's first? Anyway, the first email that we've got here, which we got a little bit earlier today as of our recording, is from Matthew, who is writing in response, in part, to the soapbox metaplot rant that I had a couple of episodes ago.
17 minutes of it? Yes. Okay.
And he writes, "Hello, guys. I agree with you. I like the source books to be more general for better gameplay. I also like your idea of doing more of the metaplots in novels. So when are we going to get the Kickstarter for the next novel?"
Oh, there's a question.
There is the question. I don't know. I actually need to there's some stuff going on with the novels that has been kind of sideburnered, backburnered because of other things that have been going on. But I absolutely want to see novels that play into metaplot to some extent or other. And as far as when we will get a Kickstarter, I don't know. I suspect that when we are ready to have novels go, they will probably be stretch goals for other campaigns.
Fair. So
but they need to be written and ready to go first.
Fair. So I'll throw my hat in the ring. I've been furloughed. I have nothing else to do. I know a lot about Earthdawn. Josh, I can write. I'm teasing. So
thank you, Matthew. I know that's
answer.
not much of an answer. But I want to see some new fiction come out, and we will get to it when we can get to it.
Yeah, it's in the pipeline eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all things are being worked on. Next email I've got is from Carl. I'm going to try and condense this a little bit because, again, we have a lot of emails to get to tonight. Hi, Josh and Dan. I've been aware of Earthdawn since the mid-90s, but only last month joined a 4th edition game. Congratulations. Since then, I have caught up on the survival guide and am 17 episodes into Legends of Earthdawn. The two have been a great crash course on the mechanics and lore. By the way, I also recommend checking out Live from Bar Save from Chad and Rachel. They did a fantastic job in things. I have questions regarding the intent around using artisan tests to demonstrate lack of horror taint. Most of the group I joined is trained in dance, as it is very easy to demonstrate on demand. When introduced to the new PC, where we have to demonstrate their art, we've been asked by city gate guards to perform it as well. Performing arts fit the mechanic better, but the lore indicates a much more expansive view of artisan skills. We could simply hand wave it with any artisan test, air quotes, but that seems to miss the role-playing point. Or the pace is very slow. We'll sit outside the gate while you fetch some reeds, and then I'll weave this basket. So how does one reconcile that?
You do your best.
Fair.
Generally speaking, like the work, in places where they would still be performing the greeting ritual, where they would still be requiring the demonstration of artisan skills, and these would tend to be probably less cosmopolitan and more remote or isolated locations. They probably would be used to the idea that it might take time for the demonstration to be completed.
Yeah. I don't figure there's a long line you're waiting in to get this done. It's probably just you and your group at the town gate, so.
Sure. One thing actually to maybe track down, and I'm pretty sure it's in the first edition book, The Earthdawn Survival Guide, which has a really good, like the first section of the book is, I think, a narrative from an apprentice troubadour kind of traveling with his master kind of thing that like covers a bunch of areas. And one of the things that happens during the course of it is a greeting ritual at the, at a village that they stop at. And how that involves one of the villagers actually, because they demonstrate their art as well, doing a sketch, like a drawing of the visiting troubadours to basically demonstrate. And now I am going to do this. So it's something that, depending on the style of game you're running, I imagine that places that still do that would want to, or would understand that it is something that can take time. But I also know that they probably would not expect necessarily a masterwork, probably something that could be completed. I would probably put it on a similar scale to karma rituals, just in terms of probably something that would be expected to be completed within, 20 minutes or half an hour. Somebody who is at least mildly practiced in a craft or skill or some sort, something that they could demonstrate reasonably quickly, that something that they could come up with.
Yeah, because they're looking to identify you as horror tainted or not. So they want to study you for a few minutes at the very least, just to see if they can poke through that veneer that a horror would present and go, there you are. Now I got you. Or, play the gotcha game for after 10 or 15 minutes.
I would, generally speaking, set the difficulty numbers for those performance tests on the lower side. Like, I think actually like 5, I think is the suggested number.
Carl has a follow-up question, which is the expectation in your game or bar save that the rank is enough to demonstrate the skill? Because he has the greeting ritual states a difficulty number of 5, or does the adept need to be advancing that? Should a high circle warrior be expecting to continue to devote legend points and training time to dancing or cooking or basket weaving or whatever they've got?
No, I certainly would not expect an adept to try and keep their artisan skill ranks like on par with their talent ranks or whatever. Troubadours obviously sort of being something of an exception on that. Weaponsmiths as well, because their performance, their crafting, their artisan abilities kind of fall right in line with what they normally do as an adept. But, unless you've got somebody who, like, you get 1 rank for free at character creation, unless somebody has really tanked their charisma, like, most characters, even if you don't put any points into your charisma attribute, like a human starts with a baseline 10 charisma, which is a step 5.
Yeah.
Plus 1 rank in...
It's a D8.
Right. Plus 1 rank in the artisan puts you at a step 6 for the artisan test, which is a D10.
Yeah.
You're looking at actually a better, a little bit better than 50% chance of success against a difficulty number 5. It's probably, if you are running a game where you are typically going to be doing a lot of wilderness travel and a lot of encounters in places with isolated villages, and you as a game master are going to be requiring a lot of performance of artisan skills for that, that's something you probably want to make the group aware of that kind of early on, so that if they want to, because you've also got those free talent ranks or those free skill ranks that you get at character creation, of maybe putting an extra rank or 2 into your artisan skill if that's something that you are going to be expecting. I know that there are great stories that have come about from somebody, I'm rolling a D8 or a D10 on my artisan skill, and we went and we rolled a 1, and now they all think we're horror marked. Ah, ha, 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 ha. There are some fun stories that can come about from that. Again, if that's something that's going to be a feature of your game, you probably want to make that something that is known ahead of time. It can certainly inspire a little bit of a side trek or something unusual there. But yeah, which is fair.
You can add a story wrinkle.
But I certainly don't think that most people would expect a warrior to be a master craftsman in whatever kind of artisan skill that they do. I think it's expected that they probably would be able to display some kind of basic ability to do it, certainly to the point to persuade folks that, that they are not tainted, whether that is an actually accurate assessment of their taint or not is up to the individual GM.
Yeah.
But if, the base difficulty is a 5. If somebody rolls a 4, I don't know that I would necessarily prevent them from entering. they might be viewed a little bit more suspiciously. Maybe you could have that. We were talking about Troubadour's previous episode and the Game Master character attitudes and so forth.
Yes.
Maybe have something like that. Have people would have a little bit more of a suspicious or maybe not necessarily hostile, but untrusting attitude towards them, which might make it more difficult to deal with them if you're dealing with something that is going to have some kind of social interactions. Yeah. I don't think the numbers, if you're looking at the base target number 5, unless you've got somebody who is intentionally tanking their charisma and not taking anything but the bare minimum in their artisan skills, they're going to have problems if they're going to be going and dealing with a lot of places where people are going to expect those kind of displays. Yeah.
Because as we've said previously in one of the first few episodes, charisma in Earthdawn is not a dump stat.
It's not really a dump stat. But at the same time, I don't think a difficulty number 5 test for something that most people are going to be having a greater than 50% chance of success is that onerous in terms of expectations.
No. I usually just make them do the artisan skill again because the town guard's like, yeah, try that again and see if I can poke more holes in your armor, socially speaking. And then I raise the difficulty number up to like a 7. Beat that one, you're fine. Get in. So I throw the mechanics in there as well. So thank you. Best of luck with your new artisan skills. So on to one from Brian, who finishes his email with he loves the podcast. We're good there. He gives us a paragraph on some personal background that Shadowrun was his jam. It was my jam as well. Then I found Earthdawn. It's now my jam. But he wanted to at least give Earthdawn a try. And he's lost all his first, second, and third edition books to divorce, moves, time, whatever. So he's starting again with fourth edition. Welcome to the fold. So his questions are, to his understanding, Earthdawn is the 4th age to Shadowrun's 6th age. Earthdawn is just coming out of a scourge with magic on the decline. Shadowrun has magic just coming back from the low point. He hasn't said anything wrong there. Also, to his understanding, in Shadowrun during the low magic, technology surged, but as the magic returns, it is not interfering with the technology. So assuming that the elves, dragons, and others feel like warning meta-humanity, we could be taking electricity into the cares, or weathering it out into orbit. Though with centuries in orbit, a space station may generate enough magic to support a horror event horizon, as he points out, and we've mentioned that on the show. Is there any evidence of technology in past ages, say Atlantis, he says? And if there is, why did it not make it out of the other side of the scourge?
Because magic is technology. Like basically the technological development, such as it is, was all magic based. Like the technological replacements that you have in, for example, Earthdawn with the clean broom and the pot of Groomba, which is basically like a little portable refrigerator, and like some of the common magic items that are available in some of the larger cities are magical replacements for technology. And you're kind of operating on the idea that with the kind of trope or cliche of, if you have magic, you don't need to develop technology. And the technological developments that we sort of have today and that you see in Shadowrun are all, like, in the grand scheme of things, really, really recent. Right? If you look at the technological advancement that has happened in the past 150 years or 200 years here in sort of the present day, any kind of high technology that you would have had from a previous, from earlier in this magic cycle or from the previous magic cycle would all be, I think, magically based.
I agree. Just look at the healing aids. A healing potion is the replacement for a high-tech surgeon if you have a punctured lung due to jousting or due to your sword hit, whatever the case may be. So your healing aids right there are magically based. Keelix's poultice and all this. Last chance salve is your CPR and your crash paddles. So all of that is your...
And not to say that you couldn't do... Yeah, not to say that you couldn't do that. It's just not the genre that Earthdawn is in. And I think any kind of, like, weird stuff is all going to be highly magically integrated.
Yeah. And we can go back to, the Arthur C. Clarke rule, which is...
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the whole thing is, to Josh's point, everything that would be otherwise solved by technology in Earthdawn is solved by magic. That's it.
For things that need to be solved, yeah.
Yeah. So he didn't need any canon answers. I don't think we gave him any canon answers. We just rambled on as he asked us to. So are there any thoughts or ideas to add another age coming out of the Cares, landing from orbit into full magic with tech to go with it, possibly going as far as something almost Stargate-ish? And I don't think that's work. Okay.
Well, so let me put it this way. He mentions Stargate-ish, and I immediately go, well, that's sort of the premise in some regards for 1879, which if you were not aware, and you are listening to this podcast, since the Shadowrun property is now owned by another company entirely, the official development ties between Earthdawn and Shadowrun are messy.
Severed.
And while we have people that have written for Earthdawn that write for the current version of Shadowrun or recent editions of Shadowrun, and so have had like Easter eggs kind of pop up between them. You know, there's still those connections that you can play with if you want them. But as far as our sort of in-house development, 1879 is, well, what if a mad scientist opened a portal to a world where magic was active, and as a result, like all sorts of forms of energy, it flowed from the high concentration to the low one and basically kicked off the awakening in the late 19th century at the height of the British Empire and Queen Victoria's reign. And basically, it's got a stable wormhole. It's got a portal in Greenwich Park to another planet where there is magic. Mm-hmm. So, like, that is something that we actually have already developed. There's a game called Equinox that was originally sort of conceived and developed as an either very, very late Sixth World or possibly Eighth World setting, which is to say that magic has that magic is around, but is post conflict with the horrors. It was sort of originally conceived as that. It is now its own game with no real actual ties, but you can see a lot of the development DNA there in terms of the setting. Yes. Mm-hmm. So, like, yeah, these are things that other people have played with, and I think it's cool.
Yeah. I would just like to keep the focus on Earthdawn, so if somebody's got that, go find it. I found other games that are similar to Earthdawn with magic and technology, but they're different, and that's why I've picked them up to play them. So it's genre mashing, which is fine, which is cool, which is love that. That's what we're here for. Okay, so we're gonna start getting to the longer emails. Actually, let's do this one real quick first because I have an apology to make. I'm gonna go to Ted's email. Hi guys, just listened to the Cavalryman episode, and boy, how did you get this trivia geek to twitching? The Lone Ranger's horse was Silver, Hi-Yo Silver away, and Trigger's horse was Roy Rogers. That is my fault. I misspoke. I got that wrong. I thought about the next day, and I'm like, oh, I feel like an idiot. I apologize to somebody who posted that online, and I also forgot to bring in Zorro's horse, Tornado, as a trained horse for Cavalryman to ride. I forgot about that completely, and I happened to end up watching Zorro last week. Again, I'm furloughed. I'm having some time to catch up on my movies.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of Zorro associated with, while he does have a great relationship with his horse, and that's fantastic. Yes. I would think of Zorro as a swordmaster and not as a cavalryman.
I agree. I just wanted to bring in, we were talking about trained horses, and I didn't want to, because again, Dale Levin's horse was Buttermilk, so I don't want to exclude anybody. I got that one wrong, and yes, Silver is the Lone Ranger's horse. Sorry about that. Anyway, he actually has a pattern question. We've been asking for those. Oh. So he finally sent one in. His question regards minor pattern items. Can threads to pattern items be voluntarily undone?
Rules as written, no.
Okay, follow-up question. Say that an adept weaves a thread to a foe's item and has defeated them.
And they're not dead. And I assume they're not dead. Because if they were dead, then that's a whole other thing.
Yes. Can the thread be unwoven or broken to free up capacity per the thread weaving rank? We did ask for specifics.
So. We did. Well, so here's the thing from my standpoint when you're talking about pattern items. We're not talking about thread weapons. We're talking about pattern items. I typically tend to see them as story MacGuffins, as a thing that you track down to further the goals of a particular story. And once their purpose has been served, for me as a GM, especially if it's fairly clear that through defeat or whatever, it's not going to be useful anymore, I would not have a problem with that being dropped as a thread item so that you could potentially open up the slot for something else. I think there was actually an unweaving knack or something along those lines that was introduced in an earlier edition. Whether that was, I seem to vaguely recall something like that. And again, other people have had that thought.
Yes.
So yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with it as something in the course of a game of, okay, the story purposes of this item have been served. I'm not going to penalize you as a result. I wouldn't refund any legend points for it, but no, I would certainly open up the slot to be available for later items if they wanted to.
Yeah, I agree with the freeing up the slot. I also agree with the I'm not giving you legend points back. No, those were spent in for what you did originally, so it's can't get that back. So his follow-up question, do horrors have pattern items?
Maybe.
And would the horror have power back through such a thread? Because
maybe.
Is a horror mark a type of thread?
Sometimes. You
can tell we have a lot of emails to get to tonight.
So, yes, some horrors have pattern items. These would be named horrors, and you could certainly have a pattern item for, because if the horror is a named horror, then it has a true pattern, and then by extension could have pattern items. And those could be used the same way as any other pattern item to gain power over the target of said thing. It is possible that the horror could use that connection in the other direction. It depends on the horror and what kind of weird things you want to do. When we talked about horrors there a few episodes ago, horrors can be an opportunity for you to bring in all kinds of weird stuff. What's interesting for the story? What kind of stuff do you want to do with them? So it is absolutely theoretically possible for that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A horror mark, certain kinds of horror marks, because all horror marks are, there are some basic premises for them, but all horror marks can operate a little bit differently depending on the horror. It is certainly possible. In fact, I seem to recall there's not really a 4th edition equivalent of it, but I think in 1st edition there was like an explicit like horror thread power that some horrors had to weave threads to a target, similar to how pattern magic would work.
Yeah, I seem to recall that as well.
But yeah, when it comes to horrors, the answers are, yeah, maybe, sure, if it sounds interesting.
Go ahead. We didn't quite get to the point in the episode where we talked about horrors, which is they are a ripe playground to add your own spice, flavor, and powers to them.
Yeah.
So by all means, do horrors have pattern items? In your game, they could. Would the horror have a power back through such a thread? Go for it. And is a horror marker type of thread item or type of thread? Sure. Make it that way. Go for it.
Yeah, like in that order of the question, it would be like, yes, definitely some horrors have pattern items. Like, there's no question about that. Could the horror use that connection back? Plausibly, if they're aware of it, maybe.
Yeah.
And the question about a horror mark being like a kind of thread, that's starting to get a little bit fuzzier. But yeah, I could see that as a thing. Why not?
So you have our permission to explore that. Feel free. Go play in that playground.
Go do weird stuff.
Exactly. So on to Joao. I know I've probably butchered your name at least a couple times because this is your second or third email into us. So Joao Isidro, I have your email in front of us. It is a long one, but he has a nice case to make for us here. He's been enjoying the podcast very much. So especially the Discipline series, which is where his questions are centering. So he was surprised by the Beastmaster podcast episode, and having just finished listening to the Cavalryman, which we put up a couple days ago, he has to ask us a few more questions regarding development process and philosophy. The general trend, if he's wrong, we'll correct you, seems to be that the discipline talents are the basic building blocks of the discipline, and the options provide additional talents to deepen the core abilities or provide alternative branches within a discipline. The archer can go wilderness archer or social archer, or just go anything in between. Weaponsmith can go more combat by picking up the options, so forth and so on. This isn't to say that it feels like a hard constraint, but a general framework for the discipline talents. Following this logic, he was really surprised by the Beastmaster episode and immediately interested in the Cavalryman one as a compare and contrast, I believe. We describe the Beastmaster as a beast class first and a wild warrior second, which is the opposite of what his talent list, talent options, and discipline abilities feel like to Joao. The Beastmaster has all the animal cooperation talents as options instead of the base talents, making the Beastmaster a wild warrior monkish class. Taking animal traits that may or may not have pets makes a lot of sense due to the complications that can arise and so forth. When it comes to the Cavalryman, he's described as specialized pet class focusing on his mount, but he has the same tools the Beastmaster has access to as discipline talents, plus all the mounted combat talents, with increasing gaming tables issues due to Earthdawn's penchant for huge mounts and inherent dungeon possibilities. He can't help but be as much of a Beastmaster as any Beastmaster. So he'd like to add that the Beastmaster discipline abilities do not involve pets in any way. So his question is this. Why the chasm between the crunch and fluff when you look at the two disciplines side by side? He understands it was a decision that developers considered other options, so he wants some insight into that.
I don't really have a whole lot of insight beyond what was said sort of in those relevant episodes. The issue with the Beastmaster, from a development standpoint, and part of the issue is that a lot of the fluff for the Beastmaster, a lot of the fluff for the disciplines in general in the 4th edition player's guide was not really revised or worked on particularly strongly in response to what changes might have been introduced as far as their progression. We talked, like, the main reason that the Beastmaster, all of the pet-focused talents ended up in the optional list for the Beastmaster relates to the difficulty of managing a menagerie, managing pets and the difficulty that Beastmaster pets could potentially bring to the game, and giving an out for players and or game masters or groups that don't want to deal with that, but the Beastmaster as a unarmed combat claw damage wilderness type is really, really popular. I always felt within sort of the greater picture of Earthdawn, and making the discipline talents pet-based in terms of like animal bond and all of that stuff would be, and make it like putting all of those pet-based talents in as discipline talents as requirements would basically force a particular style of play onto groups. And we didn't really want to do that. It's just basically, and yeah, perhaps the fluff, the introduction for the Beastmaster probably could have been rewritten to reflect that a little bit better. But that was the basic thing there. The Cavalryman being one of the less popular disciplines to be played outside of the Windling Cavalryman, but also really, really based around the idea of being a mounted warrior. The mount is a lot more integral to the mount is a lot more integral to the Cavalryman's image than pets and a menagerie are to the Beastmaster's image, I think. And so basically, you need to give the Cavalryman the toolkit to have that bond and enhance his mount, because if you don't do it in the discipline talents, then they would be options, and they, at that point, would need to, you are reducing the ability for the player to customize their character the way that they want, because they would have to take those enhancement and pet relationship talents from the options list in order to do the role that the Cavalryman should fill. And it's a tough, it's a tough balance. If you go back and like try to rebuild those things under a 1st edition paradigm, what you would end up doing is at each circle where you've got your two choices, you would have your fighty talent and your pet talent. And, kind of, it's difficult. And yeah, I mean, we kind of said a lot about that for both of those in the relevant episodes.
Yeah, and there's naturally going to be some overlap because, as you said, they're both the pet disciplines. Yeah. But the Beastmaster, as we said in the episode, if you'd rather swap out these discipline talents for the animal talents, do so. It's between you and your game master. Neither you nor I have a problem with that at all. It's just how that table wants to run. And so I think it's a fairly honest critique. I have no problem with Joao's bringing it up because
no, it's
yeah. What do you do? There's as we've said,
yeah,
so many talents.
It's fair. It's an issue with just simply the design paradigm of the talent options and a limitation of that. And the Beastmaster has just a lot of stuff, has a lot of useful stuff that is all like in line and appropriate for what they would do, and is probably certainly out of the ones that we have really discussed so far, but and maybe out of sort of all of the disciplines is the one that has the most potential flexibility in terms of how you could build that progression and still get something that is recognizably a Beastmaster. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't disagree. Thank you, Joao, for your, and I'm sorry if I have butchered your name again. Please give me a proper phonetic pronunciation of that if you email us again, and please email us again. So how are we doing? Okay, on to Aaron's email, because then we have, I can't say the best for last, but the longest for last. So Aaron is a big fan. He just listened to the Cavalryman episode where we talked about bringing Cavalryman to Terror in the Skies, and he got pwned because he was the absolute badass on the battlefield until that adventure, because then he got pwned by the Windmaster, who was completely unstoppable at that one, he says. However, there were several other situations where he found himself in tight spaces, unable to use his mount, and in the end he decided he needed to work toward his second discipline as a warrior. His question is this. One of his favorite skills from the previous editions was momentum attack, used to significant effect by the previously mentioned Windmaster. Obviously, it is still available for several disciplines as a talent, but it says it is no longer available to take as a skill. Is there a particular reason for this change? I did check the skill list. It is not available as a talent, available as a skill.
It is not? Okay.
Yes. And
I was just flipping.
Fair. I saw your mind racing to that. And also in the talent description, it says skill use, no.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was flipping to was in my PDF here.
Just to refresh Josh's memory, because he does have a lot of information.
I suspect it was probably just a balancing issue as far as that goes. You know, one of the things that it was a potential situation if you make too many of the cool combat talents skills, particularly the ones that are granting extra attacks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Basically what happens is everybody starts picking them up as skills, and they no longer have the cachet, the specialness of being available to adepts. I mean, you've still got second weapon, you've still got second attack as talents, or and that are available, I mean, that are available as skills. And just, I think limiting the ones that grant you an additional attack based on the result of another test, in the same way sort of that air dance provides an extra attack, but that's never been available as a skill because of the magical nature of you kind of air hockeying yourself across the battlefield. And I think it was just the desire to say, try and cut back a little bit on skills abilities to substitute for magical talents. You know, second edition really tried to do a lot more with skills, and I don't think that's where the focus for Earthdawn should be. You know, and so trying to downplay some of the skills that some of the ability of skills to duplicate effects of talents has been scaled back a little bit. And I don't think the loss of momentum attack is, I certainly understand it as a desirable thing to pick up as a skill
addition. Yes,
but
absolutely.
You know, at that point you just shift, you pick up second weapon, you pick up second attack. And that still gives you some of those same options. Part of that is just the fact that skills are not restricted in any way in terms of when you can pick them up. Like there's a restriction in that you can't pick up any journeyman tier skills with the free points you get at character creation, but it is absolutely possible if you have the time and money and the legend points available that a first circle character could go out and learn second attack as a skill, and as a novice character have second attack. And momentum attack, it's an 8th circle talent for Sky Raiders. It's an option. It's a journeyman option for warriors. So in theory, they could pick it up as early as 5th circle. But when you've got, you just need to look at the balance, and introducing the different tiers for skills helped balance that a little bit. Yeah. But it's just a matter of, it's not something that skilled people need to have. It's a magical ability now. There you go.
Fair. So his follow-up question is, would you be totally opposed to a house rule allowing it at the cost of additional strain as some form of compensation for the lack of official recognition as an available skill, and to account for the additional stress on the body to perform what is essentially a talented action without the aid of magic? So he's asking for extra strain. The only thing I can think of really is otherwise, the highest you can bring any skill up to is rank 9.
Well, yeah, skills are limited skills are limited to rank 10 actually, but that's okay. One thing. I would, if you wanted to have it still in there as a skill, knock yourself out. I would definitely cost it as a journeyman tier skill, just to make it, equivalent to second attack and second weapon and other, basically that because it is a journeyman tier talent for those disciplines that get access to it, it should also be a journeyman costed skill, which is to say that it costs that you have to spend a little bit more legend points in order to learn it. If you want to do it, I don't know that necessarily having it cost an extra point of strain. I think that starts getting a little bit fiddly. If you bring it back as a skill and you find that it is kind of overpowering things and you want to introduce that as a balance, yeah, that seems fair. Maybe making it cost 2 strain instead of 1. But yeah, I would say if you're going to do it, it should be costed equivalent to other journeyman tier skills like second weapon and second attack and those sorts of things.
Yeah. So he has one more follow-up question at all, which is finally going back to Terror in the Skies, as we mentioned at the beginning of his email. He plans on running this adventure using 4th edition rules. It obviously requires a little tinkering, but essentially step numbers are roughly the same, but he's concerned that maybe the item statistics are a little outdated, and also talent access is massively different, so the NPCs would need some work too. Do you, Josh, foresee any real issues arising from this, and do you have any suggestions on converting older adventures in general to new 4th edition rule sets?
My general guideline would be to go for the spirit rather than the letter of the conversion in a lot of cases. So I would just go for the spirit rather than the letter of things. You might want to take a look at stuff because I would basically try and just kind of convert things over as directly as possible using the numbers in the original adventure, but looking at gauging the difficulty of combat challenges kind of guidelines that are laid out at the beginning of the creatures chapter of the Game Master's Guide to just get a sense of saying, oh, this creature has a physical defense of 15.
Yes.
And the group's highest melee weapons or any kind of physical attack is a 10, they're going to have a really hard time hitting and damaging this target. So definitely kind of just look to those, like if you've got powers or abilities that you have questions about, kind of look through the creatures chapter and the other chapters of the Game Master's Guide and possibly the companion if you've got that, to kind of find the closest equivalent in terms of guidelines of how to maybe adapt stuff. But yeah, I having done a little bit of looking at, we tried to adapt, this 1st edition adventure into 3rd edition, and in the 1st edition adventure, they faced a Brithin. Well, Brithin in 3rd edition is a lot more powerful, so now it's just a bear, or something like that. I would be a little bit more inclined to, rather than say, it's a Brithin, I need to grab the Brithin stats and use those. Oh, that's too powerful. It's still a Brithin, but just use sort of the numbers that are present there. The step numbers and values are close enough that it's probably not a big deal if you kind of just want to use that as the foundation. Or do what I do, which is just grab the stat block from one thing that seems an appropriate challenge and use it, that's kind of similar, and use it as the basis for the encounter.
Yeah, because that Brithin might just be slightly scrawny or whatnot, or
or at that point, you could use masks again if you've got the companion. grab the size mask. Like if the standard stats for a creature that are in the GM's guide are too high for your group, then grab the masks and look at the mask sizes that actually reduce the small or infant or whatever they're called that apply negative modifiers and kind of modify them that way.
So mask them up.
Yeah.
As we're doing with the coronavirus, mask everything up. Yeah, I think that's reasonable because I've not done any conversions from other editions. I'm still running first, second, or third. I'm running Earthdawn Classic, and I still have all those adventures. So it doesn't matter if it's first or third. I've not so far come into any problems where the danger level is any harder or easier for 4th edition characters. So as far as I know, everything seems to work out so far, so good.
I mean, basically the thing to keep in mind, and this is the general guideline that's sort of in the Game Master's Guide, is take a look at the defense rating that the player characters will be going against and compare that to the step numbers that they're using. If the step numbers are higher than the defense, then they will hit a little bit, the greater the difference, they will be hitting more often. And if the defense rating is higher, then they will be hitting less often. If they're equal, you're going to be looking at about hitting half the time. And then you can kind of look at, well, okay, their average damage step with their sword is step 11. The thing's got 4 points of armor. They're going to probably be doing about 7 points of damage on average. All of those guidelines in the GM's guide, just basically understanding that in the step system, the average result on the dice is going to be the step number. Obviously, explosions, you can have really freak, bizarre things that happen every once in a while. But it's kind of just a good idea to look at those and say, okay, I can get a feel for what the expected difficulty of this is, barring any kind of bizarre freak series of rolls.
I'll give you an example. I'm playing in 4th edition now. My friend is running 4th edition for the first time in a long time. He never ran 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, but he's running 4th edition now, and he was having trouble gauging the level of party difficulty for the first few sessions. He threw something else that was way too hard. We got out with our lives. And the next session, he threw something that was way too easy. We defeated it in like 2 rounds. So he was trying his best to figure out exactly how to gauge that. And then he found that 2-page summary on exactly how to gauge the level of complexity for the party you're running. Yeah. And it has worked to magnificent effect the last 4 or 5 sessions. So right there. It's a beautiful 2 pages. I don't think that ever existed in any edition before.
Yeah, it did actually. It was not in the core 1st edition book, but it did appear somewhere in like GM section or something along those lines. But no, that's sort of basic, like something, at least the basic framework for that has existed before.
Yeah, fair. So I didn't recall it is my best. But yes, otherwise
it was wherever it was kind of easy to overlook.
Clearly, I forgot where it was
because it wasn't where it really fit best, which is at the beginning of the creatures chapter before we give you a whole bunch of stat blocks for creatures.
Yes. So that made sense because I just came across that and said, "Oh, that is a beautiful thing." Mm-hmm. And my friend's been using it. So, like I said, that is a beautiful thing. It is in the right spot. It is absolutely available. And please refer to that. That's the best we can do for any kind of conversion.
And especially if you're relatively new and you've got new people, it's you can. And then after a little bit, and you've seen what your player character group is capable of, you can say, "Oh, they've got tricks and abilities and stuff that actually make them maybe hit a little bit above their weight class when it comes to physical challenges. So maybe I can use things that are a little bit more powerful than the rough challenge indicators that are in there as well, because the creatures will have like a tier and a rough equivalent circle. Things get a little bit funky when you start going from like novice to journeyman and especially from journeyman to warden, just because the creatures are kind of scaled to be going up against those sorts of things. And there are expected tools that are available, like extra attacks and whatnot, that are kind of factored into things. So again, there is a little bit of a learning curve there, but just kind of generally to start off having, just compare those values, what you're rolling against and seeing where those kind of fall. Yeah.
I love that mechanic is reintroduced or at least explained and put in the proper section. Mm-hmm. So that'll make your life a whole lot easier. Promise. Really, really will. So we have the final 2 emails, and they're both from the same person, Brandon, who has written in before because Brandon likes writing in character, and I had a fun time last time performing in character because his orc wrote in again. So with Josh's permission and indulgence, I will do so again. So, greetings, friends. Over a month has passed since I have sent word to you, but I would like to say I am still enjoying your show. It brought me great pleasure to hear my correspondence on your show. Please tell Dan that he made a valiant effort in projecting my voice, even if the speed and volume may have been exaggerated just a touch. I have heard repeated calls for questions on patterns. There have been no questions of such to date, so I am assuming that Josh is confusing the words we use in Throlic. Perhaps patterns is not the same as the word we use for silly magic stuff, but indeed means what I want it to be, namely orcish culture or axes. So I will ask pattern questions for us instead. Can you talk about orcs and Swordmaster that uses a 2-handed axe instead because they are better soon? The scribe has reminded me that I'm over 35 years old and will surely die of natural or unnatural causes in the very near future. I think we have orcs scheduled for or Swordmaster scheduled for episode 36, so hang on with us there, we'll get there. If not, I understand, but at least answer a few short questions if you would. What is the best talent option for a 2-handed weapon Swordmaster to take at 5th Circle? The master I usually use has insisted that I learn second weapon, but alas, he is a poor teacher, and he has yet to show me how to effectively wield 2 pole axes at once. Seems like faulty advertising on his part. I have discussed this with my brother, who is an orc warrior of some renown, and he has recommended that I should ask my trainer to substitute etiquette instead. He is a little thick-headed and does not get it that our tribe finds it hilarious when he insists on formal place settings for our feast days. Salad forks and napkins? I have a reputation to uphold after all. So, what do you think? Talent option best for a 2-handed weapon Swordmaster to take.
Okay, if you are definitely going with a 2-handed weapon style for Swordmaster, what I would probably do is, if you are really not going to be taking second weapon at all, I would probably drop second attack from 8th Circle to 5th Circle and give them second attack at 5th, so that they get their second attack, which normally would be expected to be done with second weapon. Probably that's what my first instinct would be. And then at that point, you're looking at what do you want to give at 8th Circle. Looking at the Journeyman talent options for Swordmaster, if you're looking at a more sort of combat-y type, maybe Cobra Strike, maybe Spot Armor Flaw. Both of those are good sort of enhancing things. Spot Armor Flaw actually is probably the one that I would go with. Maybe Cobra Strike. Either one of those would I think be a suitable, at that point you are locking yourself to not getting the second weapon. And so you're not likely to, and you're not going to end up with the full complement of attacks that you would get sort of following the standard progression of, say, a Sky Raider or Warrior, who get second attack, but then typically get something like momentum attack to get that sort of third attack in. Because with second weapon and second attack, then you get, primary weapon, offhand weapon, and another attack with your primary weapon. So you sort of get 3 attacks out of that. And dropping second weapon to just go 2-handed.
Primary weapon. Yeah.
At that point, it's like, hey, by all means, the sort of roleplay aspect and the style thing is definitely cool. But yeah, probably Cobra Strike, maybe Spot Armor Flaw. Etiquette, if you're more of a bladesman style as opposed to the gallant, and we'll get probably more into that when we talk about Swordmasters. But yeah, those are probably the ones that I would head towards.
Fair. So he's got more in character. My final question concerns our friend Dan. It is my understanding that Dan has an artisan skill related to wordplay. He has done a very good job of using many of those words that end in cal. I was slightly concerned when I sent my first letter and encouraged him with a few examples that he could feel free to use after I heard a few instances of the C being left out. It has reappeared and been omitted a few times. It is a hard question to ask, but has Dan been marked by a horror? I strongly encourage him to find it in his ability to continue in his artistic pursuits, and just want him to know we will keep an eye out for him, as all his true friends should. The scribe has told of a terrible plague that haunts your lands, and I can only assume the horrors are at work in your lands as well. Be safe! If Dan is truly marked, I will attempt to bring a warband by airship to aid in ridding the world of this wretched thing that haunts you. No orc will let his friends suffer at the hands of a horror alone. Before the scribe asks his silly questions, I will leave you with another poem. This one about my brother Bortfar. Still can't believe he sunk legend into that talent. Bortfar, mighty leader of our tribe. Scars cover his face, but the tears well up quickly when you grab wrong fork. So, Brandon, thank you for letting me absolutely butcher your character. I am having so much fun in adding a voice to him. So I'll take seriously all your questions. Brandon's main question is, his group is mostly made up of people that played Pathfinder. He's remedying that soon enough. So they have a lot of questions, but he refers them to our podcasts. So yay, we answer all the questions for Brandon on his behalf. One question he has, though, is about downtime. And I think we want to dedicate a whole lot more to this, but very quick answer. Can we talk a little bit about how long players deal with downtime? He feels it would help both himself and his players, as they're used to just leveling up immediately. And his experience in first edition D&D, first edition Earthdawn didn't last, but a few sessions before his group split up. So his DM experience in that was mostly Shadowrun and Torg, so in other skill-based games. So how much should he be contributing to downtime as far as players are concerned?
Yeah, downtime is something that you can gloss through relatively quickly. Definitely if you've got a group that's been playing Pathfinder or D&D where you just basically hit the next level and you get a whole bunch of abilities, it can be a little bit of an adjustment to play a game where you've got to like raise your individual abilities. But I think people will kind of pick up on that reasonably well. But that is something that you can kind of go through relatively quickly. Especially, it can take a little bit longer as they get more experience and have more points to spend. But just in general, I think it's fine. What I might tend to focus on when it comes to downtime is, and you don't need to do this for every character every time, but maybe when you are doing circle advancement, particularly if you have the trainers as recurring NPCs, depends on the style of the game and stuff like that. Or even if they're not going to be recurring NPCs, you can introduce the mentor character as a game master character that you could then have in your stable as somebody that would come back later on to, as a source of an adventure hook or something along those lines. But to maybe role play out and give a little bit of spotlight time as various kind of circle ups happen, going from character to character, and maybe giving a little bit of role play focus and discussing their, philosophy and interactions and things like that. That's certainly something that you can do as a thing. But yeah, like downtime is mostly just, okay, guys, this adventure is over. You've got some legend points. What do you want to raise? And then just kind of like going around the table and saying, okay, and obviously the first time you might want to like be a little bit more hands-on in terms of like explaining how that works and say, okay, to qualify for next circle, you need to, have this stuff here. And you spend your experience to increase those abilities and your dice go up and whatnot. And so maybe the first couple of downtime sessions will be a little bit more in depth and take a little bit longer. But, once people get the gist of it and maybe have the cost chart handy, they can move through it relatively quickly.
The only thing I've done, I can't say differently, but just in addition to, is have the discussion with the players. Okay, what did you think? What can you get now that you thought would have been helpful with what you guys just did? So what talents do you want as options? And or, okay, do you need to bump up your skills? Did your artisan skill come in handy? Did your knowledge skills come in handy? Do you need to bump those up? I recommend doing so while you can still afford it cheaply. Get your 2 and 3 ranks in those to help out a little bit. So I kind of nudge them along the lines of what do you think would be helpful to flesh out A, what you just came across that you didn't have an answer for, or B, what would help you tell a better story about the character you're trying to write your own novel about? So that's the only thing I would add on to that in any way, shape, or form. Yeah.
And maybe not overload them with options. One of the things actually that you might do is work up a little handout or something that has like bullet points of, okay, during downtime, you can increase talent ranks, increase attributes, buy stuff like Forge Blade, kind of whatever, and maybe have some really basic like notes to kind of go along with that because there's a lot of stuff in that advancement chapter, but you can like focus that down to just like 4 or 5 items on a bullet point list, and then like maybe in terms of order of importance. And then if they like express interest in something, then you can go into more depth into exactly how that
because where you are in downtime helps. If they all go back to Bartertown, that's easy to do a lot of downtime things in there. If they're, off in the middle of, they just finished this adventure and they're spending 2 weeks to get back to Bartertown, but that's where they want to do their leveling up. Okay, because sure, maybe, but they have to find the teacher. So it depends upon exactly kind of where they are.
Yeah. I would recommend maybe if you've got newer players to the system, allow for downtime. Don't be super high pressure in terms of like time restrictions and, okay, you guys only have 3 days for stuff. Like, give them the opportunity, at least early on, as they're getting their feet under them and trying to figure out what the situation is, to have the luxury of not needing to be super hard pressed for time or anything like that. That, obviously, early on, they're not going to have the legend points or the money to have like a lot of stuff that they're going to be doing. So, just like kind of take it easy and ease them into it. And then when they've got some more experience and whatnot and know a bit better what's going on, then you work harder, like maybe you impose some time limits and you say, okay, you guys will have 2 weeks to get stuff done. And so maybe there will need to make some choices in terms of what they do. We don't have enough time to do everything that we want. So what are we going to give a priority to?
Yeah, because increasing your talents costs a certain amount of time versus increasing your attributes versus increasing your skills. So see what they have time to get done if you're going to try and cram adventure back to back to back.
Sure.
Not everything can get done. So, and not everything can be shot for. So that's our down and dirty, quick and easy thing on downtime. I think we have plans to address downtime further in
somewhere,
way down the line. So Brandon has a follow-up email. It seems he may have let his alter ego get a little out of hand in his last email. After sending it, he has decided he may have been a bit brash and maybe crossed the line, something which may be construed as rude. He's offering a heartfelt apology to me about my wordplay if it came off the wrong way. Brandon, it did not come off the wrong way. You are fine. He's a big fan of both of our contributions to the show, having been listening since at least earlier at the beginning of 2020. Been curious if I would keep at it for the long haul, which I have been, and encourage me in giving the show my personal flavor. If you did not hear that we were talking all things quizzical, correctional, and artisanal at the beginning of the show, I am keeping up with it to everyone's chagrin, I assume. But he may have come across that he was teasing in his efforts. You absolutely did so, and you do not have to be ashamed about anything you put
Dan's not ashamed. So, why should you be?
Not at all. Kagorsi and you do not have to learn anything at all. As long as you allow me to continue to speak about to read your emails in your character, I will continue to do that. So please keep writing in character. Is one of the fun parts about reading the emails is when people write in character. So by all means, Brandon has set the precedent. The rest of you are falling behind. But no, I am not horror tainted. There is enough pain in my life. I have overcome that. Trust me, the horrors can't touch me.
I don't know.
It isn't going to happen.
You have probably been marked by me.
That's for sure.
This past October, we we did get me all statted up as a horror. That's
for sure. So, no, Brandon, believe me, man, you are absolutely fine. Apology not accepted because you didn't do anything wrong. Trust me. I have a wonderful sense of humor about it, and as long as you have a sense of humor about how I read Kagorsi, I think we're in good shape. So he does have a PS. He just listened to the Cavalryman episode and was elated to hear that Karafod, Orcs, and Swordmasters were all mentioned. Kagorsi was pleased. So
there you go.
That's what I got. Did we miss any emails? I think one came in at the last minute.
Nope.
Okay.
That was the one we covered right at the beginning.
Right. That's what happened. So we did that in reverse order. Otherwise, folks, hopefully over the last hour or so, you have gleaned something from the 6 or 8 emails we got today. And if we didn't answer your questions,
then you should send in an email yourself.
Absolutely. And in-character emails are even great because I get to flex my voices and my talents.
To that email address, edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
Absolutely.
If you want a little bit faster turnaround on your questions, which is certainly possibility. You can follow me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. You can ask the wonderful folks at the Earthdawn Guild over on Facebook, where questions, there is a great group of folks over there that are always happy to answer questions and do all kinds of help and idea mongering and all sorts of things. We've got another group of folks at the official Facet Games Discord. We've got forums. We've got, so if you can't, if you want to get a little bit of a quicker answer, feel free to visit those places and ask, and either myself or other team members or other eager and knowledgeable people in the community will be happy to help you out and steer you rightly or wrongly in the direction of the appropriate information or answer. So feel free. It is truly a great community, and we've got great fans, and I appreciate them even when there are times that they make me want to pull my hair out and stuff like that.
Oh, what? No, we don't do that at all. Especially me. I don't do that with Josh either. No, not a bit. Not a bit. All right, folks. Other than that, this wraps up episode 27, and we will see you next week. So until next time, it's time for you to go make your own legend.
Good night, everybody.